Hello and welcome to our 129th episode. My name's Jerry Hendrix and I'm glad that you've joined us. I'm here with my friend Tique Hamilton.
129.
Yes, I know. I wanted to wait so it's an even number, but I just couldn't help myself.
Because it's going to be odd for a while.
Sure it is.
Because the evens are Sundays, the odds are Wednesdays.
My bad. Anyways, looked up our stats and that's what I found. I mean, what can I say there? Anyways, welcome to this podcast and Facebook Live. We're glad that you guys have joined us. If you have joined us on Facebook Live, leave us a comment. Let us know that you're watching and give us questions or whatever else. We'll get to it.
Maybe.
Hey, this is, I don't know if you picked up on this yet, but of course our podcast listeners haven't, but every week we bring a new mug into the experience here. I see you've got a new mug there, T.
I do. This was given to me Sunday. The Methodist Church was doing Be the Church sermon. Be the Sermon Sunday. There we go. And they came over and brought me a mug, so I got my new mug.
Shout out to our friends across the street at First United Methodist, Nate and Jenny.
Yeah, they brought their youth over.
All their friends. So.
They also brought cookies, but I don't have those today.
Neither do I. Man, that was a timely visit.
Yes, it was.
In fact, next Sunday at 10 o'clock, I'm afraid I'm going to have hunger pangs wanting one of those peanut butter cookies again.
Surely they'll do it 2 weeks in a row, right?
I thought that was the start of something really good.
Good.
I hope that they will. Anyways, thanks a lot to those guys. It's fun being a part of downtown churches in Sweetwater, Texas.
Yeah, most definitely. Got good friends over there.
Not bad at all. Well, this past Sunday, we started a new series, which also is sort of not just a new series, but we're in a new season, the Sundays of Easter. And
it's really kind of a weird time to start a new series, is it? Like right after Easter, why would you start a new series after you just had the biggest event in all Christianity?
Is that sarcasm?
C.
Okay, thank
you. That's yes.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yes. No, but that's kind of become our deal because we've had that conversation before that some people use Easter to end a series. Some will use it to launch a series. Right. We actually do it as its own thing, and then we start a new series afterwards. So you've got something to invite to, and so we started There Is More,
right?
Which is, I mean, that's probably a good statement considering there is more after Easter.
There is more after Easter, and I think you can define that in a variety of ways, whether it's for the church or for individuals. But definitely, we have the opportunity over the next several weeks to examine, several vantage points, I guess, to what the more was like for the disciples and for the life of the church as it began to kind of take root on its own. But very definitely a good time of the year and a great way for us to celebrate. This is the 1st of May.
Right.
And a good reminder that the semester is drawing to an end.
Yes, it is. I feel like we said this in the fall. This is November, and December is coming. This is May. The summer is coming.
We do live in transitions.
Yes, we do.
We try to prepare well for those. May is one of those very special months for us out of the year. I know each month or each with our rhythm, whether it's a month or in a certain series that we do, there's a certain special part to all that. But May's pretty consistent in the way that we worship and celebrate what God's doing in the lives of folks in our church. This Sunday, we recognize our graduating high school seniors.
Right. We've got high school seniors graduating, and we celebrate that, and we do it as a sending service, commissioning. And so I think that makes it really special for the seniors.
Right. And that's always one of those Sundays that's there's that struggle a bit because we do lose some students or we see them. We try to stay in that mindset of celebrating, what's next for them. But just like their parents, I'm sure, there's a little bit of struggle and wanting to hang on to them a while longer.
Yeah. And then we move to Mother's Day the next week.
Right.
And then Children's Musical the next week.
Yep. It's pretty fast and furious. And then we'll turn the corner into summer. Schools will be out and summer is its own animal in terms of our programming.
Sometimes we'll be live from different places during the summer.
I thought of that this morning because I had May and the Sundays of May in mind, and I thought about that as I recall. I looked up and saw that we had 129 episodes, which means that we've been podcasting for well over a year now, sometimes even remotely.
Yes, and are we going to take our production crew when we go to remote?
It's going to be
kind of worried.
I had not thought of that. It's going to be a lot different with the
Yeah.
way that we're podcasting now. But anyways, we'll work it out one way or the other. It'll be a lot of fun.
I feel like transition. I feel like in past years we jumped from Easter straight to the development of the church. But I like how this series has started out, that there is stuff that happens in between that the church beginning and Jesus sending disciples. And so I like this part of it that we've started so far with. There's more with talking about Thomas and the first appearance to the disciples.
Yes, it was one that I kind of struggled through. I think one of the things that I try to establish in programming, not just here, but camps or anything else, is to create a bit of a rhythm, because it seems to me that rhythms sync up with people best, with kind of where they are, what we've been saying, and what we need to say. And part of the rhythm that I've fallen into for the post-Easter messages are, because it's very easy for me just to jump straight into the book of Acts and talk about the church. And I do think that you need to do that.
Right.
But I guess maybe last year I decided that I would create that on like a 3-year rhythm. And so just trying to still pair a lot of the scripture texts that we use with lectionary.
Okay.
We kind of shift them around where you don't lose the meaning and the significance of the of the resurrection, post-resurrection Sundays, but you're able to kind of lean in and you do capture some different things that are going on. And I think one of the things that has been interesting for us this year is that we've really stayed on a real strong track since Advent in terms of the process of Jesus, his birth, developing his ministry, and coming in through Lent and the Sundays of Easter. And I really hated to break from that. I don't know what that looks like in the future years as we do this together, but definitely it seemed to be a real strong pattern for us this year. And it's been a good part of the conversation that we're hearing among our folks.
I was going to ask you, is this lectionary text that you've been using, or that you use for the series, or will it be a mixture of both?
They are the lectionary text, but they're a bit rearranged.
Okay.
And one of the things I encourage folks often, if you're interested in kind of following this conversation, one of the best things you can do is to go online, look it up on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then through that you can see our daily Bible readings.
Right.
And those readings will fill in the gaps between our conversations from Sunday to Wednesday to Sunday. And it gives you a general sense. It's in particular, since we're staying so close to lectionary text, that it fills in the gaps even better than on a normal series that we're doing. So you can see that they're a little bit rearranged, but there's a lot of good stuff there, a lot of things for us to think about that we're not able to say week to week, that you're going to be able to pick up from the daily readings.
We in the youth area, we did during Lent, we did the sayings of Jesus and John between his entry and the crucifixion and resurrection. And I talked with leadership a couple weeks ago and just said, what do you think about doing the time between resurrection and Pentecost, doing those interactions that Jesus has with disciples, and then celebrating Pentecost Sunday in the youth area, and like making it special and doing something, because we've gotten to this rhythm of really looking at the seasons of the Christian faith and then those special days, and making that kind of a special day and introducing the kids to that. So we're going to be doing that upstairs, and kind of excited about that.
Well, I think you should be. I mean, I think every church and staff is going to have their own way that they develop and create their strategy. And as you and I learn and continue to kind of frame this thing, I think it does create at least the potential for people in the rhythm of their spiritual formation to connect more deeply through these practices.
Right.
And what we've talked about is that because these practices, like Pentecost or Pentecostal Sunday, we didn't grow up hearing that.
Right.
It wasn't a big part of our conversation. But if we can embrace them, and even with students or children or whomever, it gives them the opportunity to carry something into their formation that happens throughout their life.
Right.
So that whether or not it's emphasized or brought to light in the way that they wherever they may join or be a part of later, it's still a part of who they are. Right. And so I'm excited to hear how that turns out. That ought to be.
I
really
see what
good.
You did there. Brought to light Pentecost Sunday. Well done.
It was accidental.
But now we gave them something to Google.
There you go. There you go. It makes it work.
So we talked about, in the conversation this Sunday, you talked about Thomas, and you called him Skeptical Thomas. We made the teaser last week about Dr. Lyle. Dr. Lyle called him Thomas. He was a realist, because he's the one that says, whenever Jesus says, well, let's go to Jerusalem, they say, you're going to be killed there. And he says, well, if we're going, we might as well go die with him. And so Thomas is the realist, and he wanted to see the proof. But in reality, just like you said, we probably would have been in the exact same boat. Peter didn't believe until, like, when he went to the tomb, and I think it's Luke's gospel, it says that he sees the strips of cloth and he's still pondering. He's not sure what's going on. So if he hadn't been in the room, he probably wouldn't have believed. If any of them hadn't been in the room, they probably wouldn't have believed. Maybe not have said as boldly, I got to put my hand aside. But it's natural to have that doubt moment or be skeptical about those things.
Yes. And before we go on, I was curious when we did the pre-show conversation, when we talked about the 3 segments of this text, why you kept coming back to Thomas.
Well, because we had given the teaser.
Because we wanted to give the shout out to Dr. Lyle.
Well, I had to pick up him last
Thanks
week.
for keeping us on task.
Okay, good.
I appreciate it. And we appreciate you, Dr. Lyle. And so once again, he takes the spotlight on the show. Yes, to all you just said. I lost my train of thought.
We can easily put ourselves in Thomas's shoes and understand that there's times that we experience doubt also.
Yeah, I think for what you tend to start to pick up on when you stay in the rhythm of these conversations is that we can read those texts with certainty because of our experience with the text and our familiarity with the story. But what I still struggle to try to capture in my own spirit is there wasn't a degree of certainty for them.
Right.
And I know how fast my mind will move when there's something that I don't understand or quickly grasp. And in their humanity that they were struggling with the same things.
Right.
And regardless of how fast the events were moving in terms of pace, it had to have been the top of mind thought for them.
Right. That
in just trying to grasp what was going on. So you get to the place of Thomas, and he does sort of represent what a lot of us are going to feel, that, while you're wanting to believe, it's got to be something that you experience for yourself. And I think there's a strong experience there for us.
And then, Jesus says, blessed are the ones who haven't seen but believe. And that's going to be everybody from there on out.
That's right. And that's where, for us, we have those high degrees of certainty. And we acknowledge that it's very helpful for us to be able to understand that.
So then, if you didn't want to go back to Thomas, where did you want to go?
No, I was fine. The thing that I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 conversations is that within every text that we're doing, there are so many messages and so many thoughts. And this one real clearly was divided into those 3 thoughts. Thomas was really the part that was the central part. The part I was first drawn to was the end, where John declares his purpose for writing the gospel.
Right.
And I'm a very purpose-driven person.
Right.
And I had just not, because I guess, for whatever reason, I'd never seen that. That had never jumped out at me before. But John has a unique way of approaching the gospel story. It's different than the other gospels, and we acknowledge that. And I encourage people Sunday to, if you're looking for something to read after Easter, that the Gospel of John is a great book for you to jump into, because you start to pick up on the way that on the words that he uses to describe things.
Right.
And oftentimes in more detail than what the other gospel writers would describe something. But when he talked about it, he basically set up for us that clarifying point, that in he wrote the gospel so that we might understand that Jesus was the Messiah.
Right.
That doubt ought to be in the place in our minds where that doubt is removed.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's probably, that would indicate that at that particular time there's still debate. Well, there was still debate about whether or not he was actually the Messiah. We understood who he was because you see his body of work.
Right.
And regardless of the influence of the resurrection into that experience, he wanted just to say, put it out there that Jesus was the Messiah. That's the end of this conversation. Right. Jesus is the Messiah. And the second thing that he said was that he wrote that we might understand that he was the Son of God.
Right.
So he put together two major pieces of theology for us today, but also for those who were still trying to struggle with so much information, so many events and experiences, and in their own heart and mind trying to determine what had just happened and who this was, and what it was going to mean. So that's kind of where I landed to begin with. But when you go backwards, then you begin to see that the other two texts really helped to bear that out in the experience with Thomas. But the first part of the text dealt with the disciples being locked away. The doors were locked, and they were fearful for their life, as well they should have been, because of the uncertainty. And then Jesus appears to them. So a lot of possible messages within that context, and we just wanted to try to brush with a broad stroke, but within that, just begin to say, once we understand those two things, then what's the more that we need to experience ourselves as we live through that.
Well, and John talks about signs, not miracles. Right. And that's a big thing. And he only chooses, 7 signs that he puts in his gospel. Whereas I think a lot of times we read through gospels and we never pick up on things like that because there's so many things going on in the life of Jesus. And, 4 of them are telling the story. John's very intentional with how he writes it. And it is and he tells you his purpose right there at the end.
Yeah. The Gospel of John is a great book to read, and it's one that does, I think, inspire, particularly in the 2 seasons in particular.
You emphasize the idea that Jesus breathed on them in the conversation, and kind of going back to the idea of God breathing life into humanity and creation, and it's just a really cool picture of how God sends Holy Spirit also.
That was early on in studying the text. That was where I spent most of my time, and for a while thought the whole thing was going to kind of revolve around that, because breath is interesting and what breath even means to us and to our well-being, and as indicating life and death.
Right.
And so when you go back to Genesis, I believe it's 2:7, I think it is, that it was through breath that we came to life.
Right.
And so there's a lot that represents there. That's a good message for some time, right. Just that part. And so I just like the way that John used that to describe that experience, and trying to think through what all breath means to us, not just in the moment of receiving life, but also to sustaining and living an abundant life.
Right. I like that you can pick up on those things with, like John, with all the different gospel writers, the way that they write with intentionality. And you can, if you read the whole gospel as said, and don't skip around to different places, but you read the whole gospel in one setting, you pick up on those tendencies they have, right, and the intention of how they're writing. Mark does it. He's very quick and paced. Luke has a different way that he elevates the least of these. And then Matthew's very Jewish in how he writes and kind of showing how Jesus fulfilled Scripture. But that's one thing about reading a whole gospel at a time. You can pick up on these things. And so that's good practice.
Well, and it does, because we talk here about how important language is. Mm-hmm. So when you do read from those writers, and even you get into the letters of Paul, all those words are important, and they use them for a reason. So understanding who they were and their mindset is very helpful, in the same way that us from being the communicators through this podcast or messages on Sunday, it's also important because we have that responsibility of kind of highlighting and creating that language and letting that language influence us in the way that we do life together and we minister together.
And that whole conversation gets into belief on inspiration of Scripture, how the Bible's written. Way too much for this podcast, but great conversations to have.
It was going through my mind as we were talking about this. Yes, I'm not going to get into that.
We could invite Jared and Ryan back sometime to talk about that, and then I can just sit and watch.
Probably not, but it's a good thought.
So then, where are we going this Sunday? If we did Thomas and Jesus' experience in the room with them, where are we going this week?
Well, this week we're going to talk about another appearance of Jesus, and I can't recall what it is.
For those of you in podcast world, my coffee almost went all over the table.
Sometimes our Wednesday mornings start really fast, and this was one of them. And
well, we're doing the story of Thomas
right.
on this coming Sunday in youth, because we did the first witnesses last Sunday, and so we did the women at the tomb. And then we're going to the road to Emmaus after that.
Well, in staff meeting yesterday, I got it wrong. So I'm studying more than one text at a time.
Right.
And so,
which is common.
And yesterday, I thought it was going to be the Peter in Acts chapter 3, where Peter and John heal the blind beggar.
That's 2 weeks.
That's
away.
2 weeks away. Yeah. So I couldn't tell you right now what tomorrow is.
But we are having a conversation Sunday. We will assure you.
And I've already started it. I know that it's in the Gospel of John, but that's about all I got right now.
Well, sidebar then. This is going back to what we did Sunday.
And if you've listened this far into the podcast,
yeah, you'll still get it.
That's the reason.
So, sidebar, going back to what we did in Youth Sunday, as I'm going through that lesson, one of the interesting things to do is, like it just caught me, I'd never seen it before, is to read that account of the experience of the women as the first witnesses in Luke, and then to go back and read the encounter of the shepherds at the announcement in Luke 2. And to pair those together and look at the similarities between the stories of who was witnesses, maybe the context of light versus dark, the appearance of the messengers. Really a cool text put together. So I'm not going to explain all that, but go read those two passages, or if you're out there, read those two passages and just look at them side by side and the similarities there. It's masterful storytelling.
And maybe one that you ought to tell on Sunday.
Well, no. I saw what you did there. I don't know if you know it or not, but last week was International Youth Minister Preaches Week. Apparently, there's youth ministers preach after Easter Sunday.
We don't have an international youth minister.
Well, true. Youth ministers do it after Easter Sunday, and then apparently they do it after Christmas. It's like you preach the high holy holidays, and then while you're resting, we get to the backup.
It's sarcasm again.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Sarcastic youth ministers.
But thank you for not doing that to me. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
Thanks.
But
so we'll be here next week.
We will be here. We'll continue to talk about the more that we discover in our relationship with Christ. And I think it's going to be a really good conversation, a good thought for us as we go through this for the next few weeks.
There definitely is more next week.
There definitely is, and we look forward to seeing you there.
So, see you then.